It started without warning. No ultimatum, no countdown, no speech from a general on state television. Just sirens. Screaming across Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba, Ramat Gan, Bat Yam, and Holon. City after city, the same sound. The sound that tells you something is coming. You have 90 seconds to find a wall thick enough to survive it. This is the story of what happened when Iran hit Israel for 3 straight hours. Let me take you back to February 28th, 2026. It was a Saturday morning in Tehran when the sky broke open. American B-2 stealth bombers, launched from Diego Garcia, crossed into Iranian airspace undetected. F-35 fighter jets and Tomahawk cruise missiles fired from U.S. Navy destroyers moved in alongside them. In minutes, explosions tore through the heart of Tehran. The leadership house was struck directly, multiple times. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran for over 3 decades, was killed. The United States and Israel had just assassinated the head of state of a major regional power. Within hours, the IRGC activated Operation True Promise Waiful. This time, Iran had nothing left to lose. Ali Larijani declared an interim leadership council, accusing the U.S. and Israel of trying to dismantle Iran. In the first 24 hours, Iran launched a staggering number of weapons. Against the UAE alone, 167 missiles and 541 drones. Against Israel, nearly 100 projectiles in the first 2 days. By day 5, it was over 500 missiles. Think about the cost. A Shahed 136 drone costs $20,000. A Patriot interceptor costs $4 million. Israel's defense has 3 layers: Iron Dome for short range, David's Sling for medium, and the Arrow system for ballistic missiles. On the night of March 1st, a large barrage was inbound. In the sky, explosions lit up the darkness like stars. In Beit Shemesh, 1 ballistic missile slipped through. It struck a reinforced security room inside a synagogue. 9 civilians were killed. It was the largest single death toll in Israel since the war began. In Ramat Gan, a missile with a cluster bomb warhead struck an apartment building. 2 residents were found dead. A cluster bomb works like this. A missile breaks open in midair and releases hundreds of smaller explosive submunitions. Over 100 nations have banned cluster munitions. Iran, Israel, and the United States have not. On March 19th, a foreign worker at Moshav Adanim was killed by shrapnel from an Iranian cluster missile. For the first time in history, an Iranian missile struck and damaged a United States F-35 stealth fighter jet. At least 18 people killed in Israel, and over 2,300 in the broader conflict. Iran is still firing. How? Why? And what happens when the missiles start to run out? We answer that in part 2. Stay with me. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something about how this war is being fought on Iran's side. Because most people look at the numbers, hundreds of missiles, thousands of drones, and they assume Iran is losing, that it's bleeding out. The story of why Iran is still firing, 3 weeks into a sustained bombing campaign, is far more complicated than a simple supply problem. This is part 2, and this is the story of the weapons, the walls, and what neither side is telling you. Let's start with the Shahed drone. It looks like a toy compared to what the United States flies. It is roughly the size of a jet ski. It has a small gasoline engine. It flies at about 185 kilometers per hour, slower than a commercial helicopter. It has a limited range. The Shahed drone is cheap, dirt cheap. Estimates put the manufacturing cost at around $20,000 US per unit. Compare that to the Patriot missile used to shoot it down, which costs approximately $4 million, or the THAAD interceptor, $8 to $12 million. The math is brutal. For every Shahed drone that forces a Patriot launch, Iran spends $20,000 and the defending side spends $4 million. In Bahrain, air defenses intercepted 125 missiles and 201 drones. They struck ports, a hotel, a refinery, and a water desalination plant. The Shahed drone flies low. It hugs the terrain. It shows up on radar with a very small signature, particularly at low altitude. It can be launched from the back of a truck, from a field, or from a shipping container hidden in the desert. By day 16 of the war, IDF figures showed over 7,600 strikes conducted inside Iran. Over 70% of Iran's missile launchers were neutralized. But Iran does not need to fire at full strength to win the psychological war. A drone that costs $20,000 causes massive disruption. The damage is in the fear. The economic cost of running the defense systems, every flight diverted, every family sleeping in a stairwell. The Tel Aviv metropolitan area has been the primary target. More than 3.5 million people live in this corridor. Since the war began, Lebanese Hezbollah has been launching its own separate wave of attacks against northern Israel. Israel is fighting a 2-front war, the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway through which approximately 20% of the world's oil supply flows every single day. On March 14th, the FBI issued a memo alerting Los Angeles of a potential Iranian drone attack. The threat touched U.S. soil. Is there a ceiling to this war, or does it keep escalating? That is what part 3 is about. Stay with me. There is a moment in every war when one side stands at a podium and declares victory, and then the missiles keep coming. On day 17 of this war, the White House press secretary stood before the cameras and said the following: Iran's ballistic missile capacity is functionally destroyed. Their navy has been assessed as combat ineffective. The United States has achieved complete and total aerial dominance over Iran. Those are not small claims. And within hours of that statement being made, Iran launched another wave of drones toward the UAE. Dubai contained a fire near its international airport and temporarily suspended flights. A person was killed in Abu Dhabi. Explosions were heard over Bahrain. That is the paradox of this war. The stronger side keeps declaring that the weaker side has been defeated, and the weaker side keeps firing. This is part 3, and this is the story of how a war ends, or doesn't. Let's talk about what the United States and Israel have actually accomplished in 3 weeks of combat. The scale is genuinely staggering. Since February 28th, U.S. forces have struck more than 7,000 targets inside Iran. The IDF has conducted nearly 5,000 aerial sorties. More than 4,700 strikes were directed specifically at Iran's missile infrastructure. 70% of Iran's missile launchers have been neutralized. 85% of its radar and air defense systems are gone. Its navy can no longer operate as a coherent fighting force. The state broadcaster was struck. Iran's parliament building was targeted. The IRGC's military research building was completely demolished. Trump told reporters, quote, "Just about everything's been knocked out." And on the raw military metrics, he was not entirely wrong. But here is what those numbers don't capture. Iran is a country of 87 million people. It spans 1.6 million square kilometers. It has mountains and deserts and underground tunnel networks that took decades to build. The IRGC dug missile storage facilities into the sides of mountains, specifically because they knew one day an enemy would try to destroy them. You do not eliminate that kind of infrastructure in 3 weeks. Not completely. Tehran has endured the heaviest bombardment, but the country is enormous, and not everything that was hidden has been found. And there is a second problem that is even harder to solve: people. Since February 28th, Iran's health ministry says at least 1,244 people have been killed and over 1,800 injured inside Iran. The victims ranged in age from 8 months old to 88 years old. These are not combatants, these are civilians. At least 55 healthcare workers were wounded and 11 killed: doctors, teachers, children. In the Arab world, watching a foreign military kill Iranian civilians day after day produces a very specific reaction. It produces rage. Saudi Arabia hosted an emergency meeting in Riyadh. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman began feeling domestic pressure. Former CIA Director David Petraeus noted that Iran's decision to strike Gulf states may have been a strategic miscalculation. But Petraeus also acknowledged, every dead civilian in Tehran makes this war harder to sustain politically, both in the US and Europe. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed that the United States can use British military bases for defensive strikes against Iran. An Iranian drone struck a runway at a United Kingdom military base in Cyprus. Iran hit a British base in the EU's backyard. And then there is the internal collapse happening inside Iran itself. President Masoud Pezeshkian issued an apology to neighboring states. The IRGC ignored him. The Revolutionary Guards continued their attacks. A sitting president orders the military to stop. The military keeps firing. Who is really in charge? Ali Larijani declared himself head of the Interim Leadership Council. He said the war would continue. And then, on the night of March 17th, Israel killed him too, dead, in a single Israeli airstrike. And here's where the war stands today, on day 20th. The numbers are down dramatically, but the launches have not stopped. Because for the IRGC, surrendering is not a concept that exists. Still a threat. Still sirens over Tel Aviv. What does the end of this war look like? Nobody knows. Not really. Trump announced that the U.S. had accepted an Iranian proposal for negotiations. Then, Larijani was killed. The leadership structure is unclear. The Strait of Hormuz remains the knife at the world's throat. A third of all worldwide oil transported by sea passes through there. Oil and gas prices have surged since February 28th. The Pentagon has asked Congress for more than $200 billion to fund this war. They are not statistics. They are the cost of this war, paid by people who had no power to stop it. You watch. You stay informed. What is happening right now will shape the next decade of global history. Subscribe. Stay ready.